Hi, I'm Mike Richter, and today I'll be talking about a parental IQ test that I found in this book right here. It's Raising Your Child's Financial IQ by Robert Kiyosaki, which was included in this game that my kids and I have been playing for a couple years now called Cashflow For Kids. I thought you'd be interested because I've been reading through the book again, and I felt that it would be really important to share because there's some things that in life, we trust schools to teach our kids about a lot of things, and sometimes they just don't hit the mark on things like we think they should. And sometimes it's the responsibility of the schools to a certain extent, but ultimately the responsibility for educating our children rests on our shoulders. And sometimes we need to take some time to really look introspectively and look at what we've done and what we've been doing to see if we're doing right by our children so that we can set a good example for them. So that's kind of the context for this IQ test. It was passed out by the Superintendent of Schools in a part of Hawaii for parents that were really getting up in arms about how their children were failing in school. And it was just something to give the parents something to think about. So keep that in mind when we're going through this. So first question is, how many times per week do you ask your child, did you do your homework? And actually check on it and go over it with them. Fair enough. Or how is school going? And actually taking the time and really getting a good answer from it. A lot of times we're fairly content to have our kids tell us okay or fine or whatever, it was okay. But we don't take the time to really have that interest in their answers and really help get them to share with us so that we can really know what's going on with them. The second question is, how many hours per week do you spend actually giving your child a hand with their homework? And it's not about giving them the answers, but it's about taking time to really support them in the learning process and giving them different examples or different ways of looking at things that maybe they weren't taught in the classroom. Maybe you've got a different way of looking at things, or you learned something a completely different way than it's being taught in schools, and maybe your child can really benefit from that. And of course, they can benefit from that time with you. The third question is, how many hours per week do you spend actually playing with your child? Now, we're not talking about playing PlayStation or video games or anything like that. We're talking physical activities, things like sports, running outside playing tag, bike riding, hiking, things like that. Things to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Because a lot of us, especially nowadays, we spend a lot of time on the couch, we spend a lot of time sitting, and we don't tend to spend a lot of time going out and doing things physical to promote our own well-being. So that is kind of modeling behavior for our children to adapt. We need to be really careful about what are the kinds of behaviors that we're exhibiting and that we're raising them with, and how are we going to set that example for them. The fourth question is, how many hours per week do you spend entertaining your child? Things like watching TV, going to the movies, sporting events, things like that. Things where the children are mostly passive in the activity. I found myself kind of guilty about this for a little bit, where I had times where I would much rather put my kids in front of the TV and do things that I wanted to do, which is really not fair for them. And it's really hard to go ahead and put out there, but that's something that I had to struggle with. And things often got in the way. And now, thankfully, I'm able to spend more and more time with my children, and it's been really beneficial both on my side and for them. So think about that. Fifth question is, how many hours per week do you spend educating your child on subjects you think are important for their lifelong development? These are important subjects like spirituality, morality, finances, helping those that are less fortunate than yourself, things like leadership, things like what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman, or what your values are as a family. How often do you take the time to really share that with your children so that you can express your values in such a way that your child can see your values, and where they work, they're going to tend to adapt them, and where they're not working, hopefully they can find another model to take for an example and really switch off of some of the more negative things that are going on. But honestly, so many people don't even spend hardly any time at all with their children talking about these really lifelong important things, that if we took time and really sat them down and said, look, son, there are some things that you need to know about this world, or this is something that we as a family stand for, that really gives the child a sense of family identity. And that's just something to think about. Let's see. Question number 6. How many hours per week do you spend on your own education? Now, this is something that's pretty interesting. In a lot of households where lifelong learning is not modeled by the parents, you have parents talking to their kids about how school's going and things like that without really modeling that continued lifelong education for themselves. My children often see me reading books or taking courses or things like that. I've long been done with my master's degree. I've long been done with formal education, but I regularly look up different things to educate myself on things that I know that I could use improvement in. So be careful the activities you're doing, because those activities are the example for your children. And so because I tend to read a lot, my daughter will often pick up a book and sit right next to me and read herself. And that's a wonderful thing. She just turned 7, so it's really awesome to see her reading so many books. And it's really given us a lot of time to have good discussions about what she's reading, and really for us to connect as a father and a daughter. Question number 7. How well do you know your child's teachers? Do you respect them as professionals? And are they the kind of role models that you would have for your children? Now, this isn't about respect or disrespect or anything like that. All it is about how much attention do you pay to the folks that are in your child's life. Thankfully, in my case, my children are taught by myself and my wife. So I know my wife very well. And yes, I do see her as a role model for my daughter. And I see a lot of her characteristics and capabilities as being positive to model to my son too. And that's a wonderful thing. But for most parents that have their children in public schools, it's very hard for you to actually get a good feel for, who your child's teacher is, especially when you only get a couple of parent-teacher conferences throughout the year. You really have to make intentional efforts to really get to know them, if that's something that you're interested in doing. I figure if my child is going to be taught by this person for 6 to 8 hours a day, they're spending as much, if not more, time with my child than I am. So I really should get to know that person, so that I have an idea of how to steer the conversation with my children about certain things. Let's see. Question number 8. How well do you know your child's friends and their parents? And are they the kind of role models you want for your children? Once again, this isn't a respect or a disrespect thing, but birds of a feather tend to flock together. You want to have an idea of who your children are going with, and their parents, kind of get an idea of what the family structure is like, so that you can make an educated choice on how you guide and how you assist your child through that, and maybe helping them to be selective about who their friends are. The 9th question is, are you a role model of what you want your child to grow up to become? And I'll admit that for a long time, I did not feel like I was a good role model for my children about what I should be or who I should be. And I really had to take the time to look at myself in the mirror and say, Mike, there are certain things that you need to change about yourself so that you can be a better dad to your children, because I did not want my son growing up to be like me in certain things. There are other great things that I had going for me, but some things I felt that I was lacking in, and I had to go ahead and make intentional efforts to really change things so that I can look at myself in the mirror and say, I am the kind of man that I would want my son to grow up to be, or I am the kind of man that I would want my daughter to grow up to marry. Think about that. That is such an important thing because you model the behaviors to your children. You model financial matters, you model the way you deal with conflict, you model the way you act in public, you model your values. There's so many things that are so important that your children will get from you, and your actions are much louder than your words. So make sure that your actions and your words are congruent. Question number 10. How many times this week have you hugged your child? It's a pretty simple one, right? Hugs are magic for children. I love my children so much, and sometimes that early morning hug is just such a beautiful thing for both me and for my children. Question number 11. How many times this week have you told your child that you love him or you love her? I remember growing up, I didn't really hear that too much from my father, and so for a long time it really had a negative effect on me and how I expressed myself. Not necessarily with my children, because I kind of grew out of it by the time we had children, but it really affected the way that I developed relationships just because of the way my father had been with me growing up. Question number 12. How many times this week have you told your child that you are proud of him or her? And that's the thing, is they want our approval. They want us to be proud of them. And you know what? If we're doing our best to guide them and to show them the way, chances are we're going to be really proud of them. And we can't be really skimpy with the way that we shower praise on them. I mean, we can be selective about it. We don't want to raise our children to be in a everyone gets a prize kind of mentality. We don't want to get them used to an entitlement mentality. But on the same time, we want to make sure that they are proud of their efforts as they excel. And then we want to teach them that excellence is the standard. At least that's a value in my family, that excellence is the standard, and the more that you excel, the better. So if you felt that this was valuable to you, or there's somebody in your life that could really use this right now, then by all means go ahead and give it a thumbs up and feel free to share. If you'd like to hear more from this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm going to attach a PDF of these 12 questions down in the description below for your downloading or for your viewing pleasure. By all means, go ahead and download it. It's perfectly free. If you're looking for ways to educate yourself, I've also got a free PDF down in the description below of 60 of the best books out there for workers, leaders, and entrepreneurs. There's a lot of books in there about relationships as well as education and finance. So there's several awesome books that you can get a lot of lessons from. And if you want to get this game, Cashflow for Kids, I'll also leave a link in the description box so that you can get it off of Amazon. Thanks so much for your time. Make it a great day. And remember that you're only one action away from the rest of your life. Make it count.